Imagine this. It's February 19, 1980. London is cold, quiet, ordinary. On a residential street in East Dulwich, southeast London, a Renault 5 is parked outside a flat. Inside that car, slumped in the passenger seat, is Bon Scott, the man Rolling Stone would later call one of the greatest rock vocalists who ever lived. He's been there all night. He's not sleeping. He's dying. And nobody is coming to check on him. By the time anyone opened that car door, it was already too late. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is all about the real stories behind rock's most legendary figures. If you've been here before, you already know we don't do surface level. Hit like if you're ready to go deep, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Now let's talk about what really happened the night Bon Scott died, and the man who's never had to answer for it. To understand that night, you have to understand who Bon Scott was, and what he meant to rock and roll. Born Ronald Belford Scott in Scotland in 1946, Bon grew up in Australia and spent his 20s grinding through the music scene. Bands that went nowhere, a motorcycle accident that nearly killed him in 1974, a short stint as ACDC's roadie before he talked his way into becoming their singer. And when he did, everything changed. His voice was raw and dangerous, equal parts swagger and chaos. He wrote lyrics that felt like they came from someone who had actually lived every word. By 1979, ACDC had broken through internationally with Highway to Hell, their seventh album and their first real crack at American stardom. The future had never looked brighter. Bon Scott was 33 years old, and the best years of his career were supposed to be ahead of him. He had already attended a recording session on February 15th, just 4 days before he died, where Malcolm and Angus Young were laying down early ideas for what would eventually become Back in Black. Bon was there, sitting at the drums, playing around, being part of the process. He was locked in. He was present. He was working. Then came the night of February 18th. The details of that evening have been picked over for decades, and the more you look at them, the more questions pile up. Here's what we know for certain. Bon's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Silver Smith, got a call from him around 7:30 that evening. He wanted to go out, wanted to catch a band at a Camden club called Dingwalls. Silver had other plans and declined, but she offered to send along a friend of hers, a man named Alistair Kinnear. And that decision, that small, casual redirect, would set everything in motion. Kinnear and Bon ended up not at Dingwalls, but at the Music Machine, a well-known venue at the bottom of Camden High Street. And according to Kinnear's own account, given to the London Evening Standard just 2 days after Bon's death, Bon was already drunk when he picked him up. Not tipsy, drunk. And when they got to the Music Machine, Bon was reportedly drinking 4 whiskeys straight in a glass at a time. That detail came from Kinnear himself. Now here's where the story takes its darkest turn. At some point in the early hours of February 19th, the night wound down. Kinnear drove Bon toward his flat in Victoria, trying to drop him off. But Bon was unconscious in the passenger seat. Kinnear couldn't wake him, so instead of getting help, instead of calling someone, instead of staying with him, Kinnear made a decision. He turned the car around. He drove back to his own flat at 67 Overhill Road in East Dulwich. He parked outside. He put the seat back so Bond could lie flat. He threw a blanket over him. He left a note with directions to the flat. And then he went inside. And he went to sleep. Let that sit with you for a moment. The man who was supposedly Bond's friend for the evening, the man Silver Smith had sent to look after him, left an unconscious person alone in a car overnight and went to bed. Kinnear claimed he checked on Bond before going inside and tried to wake him. He couldn't. He called Silver, who apparently told him that Bond passed out frequently and that it was best to just let him sleep it off. So Kinnear took that advice and left him there. The question that nobody has ever satisfactorily answered is, how long was Bond actually in that car before anyone realized something was seriously wrong? Because here's where the timeline starts to crack open. According to Kinnear's own account, he discovered Bond unconscious and unresponsive in the evening of February 19th, meaning Bond had been in that car for somewhere between 12 and 18 hours before Kinnear even went back to check. 12 to 18 hours, alone, in a car, while his friend was inside the flat sleeping, then going about his day. But there's another version of events that makes things even more unsettling. UFO guitarist Paul Chapman has claimed that he was informed of Bond's death early on the morning of the 19th, hours before Kinnear says he discovered the body. Pete Way of UFO corroborated this, saying Chapman called him that morning asking for Angus and Malcolm Young's phone numbers because Bond was dead. If that's true, then either the timeline Kinnear gave was wrong, or there were other people involved that night who have never fully stepped forward. The official coroner's report concluded that Bond Scott died of acute alcohol poisoning. The classification was death by misadventure. The toxicology report made no mention of other substances. But over the years, questions have persisted. Multiple people connected to that scene have alleged that heroin was part of the picture. Not necessarily that Bond was using it himself that night, but that the people around him were, and that the full story of what happened in those hours has never been told completely. Wikipedia itself describes Kinnear notably as a former musician and alleged drug dealer. Colin Burgess, ACDC's original drummer who was also at the Music Machine that night, told author Murray Engelhart something that stopped me cold when I first read it. He said that when he and Bond parted ways that evening, Bond was completely fine, not drunk at all, and the next day he was dead. Bond's body, when it was finally found, was not in the position Kinnear claimed to have left him in. Author Clinton Walker, who wrote the biography Highway to Hell, The Life and Times of ACDC legend Bond Scott, described the scene. Bond was curled around the gear stick, his neck twisted, his dental plate dislodged. He had aspirated vomit, his airway blocked. He was asthmatic. He was alone. And he was 33 years old. Kinnear rushed him to King's College Hospital in Camberwell. Bond was pronounced dead on arrival. After that, Alistair Kinnear gave his statement to the Evening Standard, gave an account to friends that was published years later in Metal Hammer, and then essentially vanished from the public narrative. No charges, no inquest findings against him, no accountability of any kind. Jesse Fink, who wrote the deeply researched book Bond, The Last Highway, eventually tracked down Kinnear's death certificate, issued by a Spanish court in 2015, confirming that Kinnear was real, and that he had lived out his life far from the spotlight he helped create, dying without ever having been seriously pressed on what happened that night. The questions that remain aren't conspiratorial in the dramatic sense. Nobody is seriously suggesting Bond was murdered. What people are questioning is simpler, and in some ways more painful than that. What if someone had stayed with him? What if Kinnear had driven him to a hospital instead of home? What if Silversmith had come out that night? What if any number of small decisions had gone differently? Bond was due at the recording sessions the very next day. Angus and Malcolm were waiting for him. He had a future that was supposed to last decades. Instead, he was found in a cold car on a quiet street in southeast London, alone, after a night that no one has fully explained, after being left there by a man who faced no legal consequences whatsoever. ACDC nearly fell apart. Angus and Malcolm briefly considered ending the band, but Bond's family, specifically his mother, gave them her blessing to continue. They hired Brian Johnson, a vocalist from the British glam rock band Geordie, and they went back into the studio. 5 months after Bond died, they released Back in Black. The cover was entirely black. No text, no art, no decoration. Just black. A tribute. The bell that opens Hell's Bells was their way of saying goodbye to a man they couldn't eulogize in words. Back in Black went on to become one of the best-selling albums in music history. But none of that changes what happened on that street in East Dulwich. Bon Scott didn't die in a blaze of rock and roll chaos. He didn't go out on a stage or in a moment that at least carried some poetry to it. He died cold and alone in a parked car, while the person responsible for him that night slept inside. And that person walked away, lived his life, moved to Spain, and died without ever being held to account. That's not a conspiracy. That's just the brutal, unglamorous truth of what happened to one of rock's greatest voices. And it's a truth that Bon Scott, of all people, deserved to have told clearly. If this story hit you the way it hits me every time I go back through it, leave a comment below. What do you think really happened that night? And if you want to go even deeper into the stories that rock history doesn't always tell straight, turn on notifications so you never miss one. There's another video right here you should watch next. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.